Producer's note. This episode contains mention of sexual assault depicted in media. Listener discretion is advised.
This is a Dauntless Media Collective podcast. Visit dauntless.fm for more content.
This happens to Asian women all the time. We're always told to be quiet, to not say things that would offend our communities or our families.
If we are not going to allow us the space to actually be our full selves, no one is ever going to give that space. If we don't even give it to ourselves, how the hell are we supposed to expect other people to give us that space?
Hi, I'm Nate Nakao.
And I'm Scott Okamoto.
And this is Full Mutuality.
Was I supposed to do that?
Yeah, I think it worked. So today's podcast episode. Yes, we are. We're professionals. We're so good at this. I'm going to call it out now. We're having some internet issues today, so we'll see how this goes. This episode is going to be a whole lot of fun, I'm sure, between internet issues and me having a cold. But here we go. We're going to dive in. So I'm joined by a guest host today who you just heard. And you've heard on the show before. Welcome back, Scott. Thanks for joining me as my guest host today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and got some big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best.
Appreciate it. I'm sure you will. It's the whole like Asian thing, right? You know, we always do our best. Put in 100% effort.
Yeah, you guys.
Well, I'm going to put like
75%
because not your model minority.
I thought the joke was it's the Asian thing. We're all replaceable. All interchangeable.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're interchangeable. Yeah. So today on today's episode, we have two incredible guests that I'm excited to have a conversation with. It's going to be a bit of a roundtable conversation, but I do want to give our guests the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about themselves and what they do. But our guests today are Mei Lee Young, who is a writer, performer, and educator, and Naomi Ko, who is a filmmaker and Bush Leadership Fellow. And I think you're going to explain that a little bit as we go along. And both of these amazing women are co-founders of the Funny Asian Woman Kollective with a K, also known as FAWK.
Yeah, fucking A.
Yeah.
Fucking A.
Yes, thank you so much, Nate. We're excited to be on.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. So we're kind of in a weird place right now. I think when I had first reached out to you all, I said, hey, we're going to be approaching the second anniversary of the Atlanta shootings, and I wanted to talk to some Asian women in particular, but Asians in general, and just to kind of talk about the Asian American experience. And then here we are, actually sitting down to record, and not one, but two mass shootings deep in the heart of our community as Asian Americans have taken place in the time between my first outreach to you all and now that we're recording. And so it does kind of hit pretty hard. But, I guess to kind of start off, what are some of your thoughts and experiences as we're trying to figure out and navigate our existence in this country? Maybe we can backtrack a little bit, and if you're willing to kind of go to some of the history for yourselves, for your families, for your, I guess, grappling with your identity as Asian Americans and what that looked like for you. And I guess, Naomi, if you want to kick things off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a daughter of South Korean immigrants. I was born and raised in Minnesota. So in terms of, grappling with my Asian American identity, it's always been, I've always lived in an existence of knowing that I was an outsider, knowing that I was Asian, and knowing that what kind of Asian I was, especially being from Minnesota, where there isn't a lot of East Asians. There aren't a lot of Korean Americans, and May will go more into detail about Minnesota's large Southeast Asian refugee population. But I think for me, what I always thought about in terms of my own Asian American identity and my family's placement is how we even got to the United States. And my dad's eldest sister, my aunt, married an American soldier. He was stationed in South Korea during after the Korean War, and because of that, that's how our family was able to immigrate. So this idea of knowing that my aunt was a war bride, I don't think she would describe herself as a war bride, but in reality she is. Knowing that this is how we came here, and then looking at, of course, the 2-year anniversary of Atlanta coming up, what happened last year in New York, and now what's going on, that very much my place and my family's place has really been tied to American imperialism and how Americans and the West, European West, have viewed Asian bodies, especially Asian female bodies. So, I mean, in terms of that, knowing that Asian American women have always been hypersexualized, that we've been viewed as being submissive, subservient, and that we've had these perceptions and how our bodies are in relation, and the fact that we do a lot of work with our hands. For example, the women who died, everybody who died in the Atlanta mass shootings 2 years ago, that was in a massage parlor, and the mass shooter, he specifically went to these Asian massage parlors, and so, yeah, I think that's really kind of really looking at in terms of my Asian American identity. For me, I think something that I feel is a little bit different is that I've never, how do I say this without sounding like a dick? I might just sound like a dick. Yeah. I mean, I've never been ashamed of being an Asian American. I've never been ashamed of being Korean, which I think contrary to people, they might be like, well, you as a Korean, don't you feel like you hate yourself? And I'm like, but that's for a very different reason. That's the just general self-loathing of my culture. But
the Han.
Yes, the Han and Hwabyong and all of that. But no, I've always been very proud of being Asian and being Korean American. When I think for me, growing up in Minnesota, growing up in suburban Minnesota, and even growing up in Cedar Riverside, that's where I spent the first 5 years of my life, was in Cedar Riverside, which was a public housing unit in Minneapolis that actually was mostly Somali and East African immigrants and refugees who came to Minnesota. But there were maybe like a couple dozen Koreans who were living there. And for me, knowing that I wasn't either East African or being white, my experience in suburban Minnesota, like I took like the hyper proud route. I felt like I had to really be extra, like if everybody knew that I looked different, everybody knew I was different, everybody knew that we had a kimchi refrigerator at my parents' house, and everybody knew that we were immigrants and we were different, that I really leaned into that Koreanness, that Asianness, and really was kind of in everybody's face about it. For school projects, I would do that when people would talk about like, for example, history. I was really in your face about it. When I was an athlete, I was super in people's face about it. I felt like that kind of, in some ways, some Asian Americans have felt like they were invisible in ways. Yeah, I felt like I was invisible, but I also made sure that I was hyper visible at the same time, because if you were going to, do that thing where you would pull your eyelids up, or you would call me a chink or a Jap, well, you're going to pay the price for that. And I was going to make your life a living hell because of it.
I mean, that it's funny because that to a degree is sort of the opposite of my experience. I didn't have that drive to really assert myself in my racial identity. I think in a lot of ways I was a little bit embarrassed by it, but I was also relishing in the fact that so many people found half of it really cool. So I'm biracially Japanese and Filipino American. And I think for me, there was this sense of I grew up in very white areas and areas where whiteness was heavily celebrated, even in ways that are not, well known, and other parts of different racial identities were constantly tampered down. And I think part of that is also the religious upbringing too. Growing up in an environment where I was told that Pokemon was satanic, and that was drilled into our heads because it was, a reference to the kami, the Shinto gods. So to have that, something that's inherent to who I am, be considered sinful and satanic, well, I had to do what I could to eradicate that from myself. So I was always the kid that wanted to be white, that wanted to hang out with the white crowd. I mean, I worked really hard to hide any sorts of Asian influence, whether that's a Filipino accent from my mom's family or my dad came over to the U.S. When he was a bit older, so his English was a little bit broken, and I didn't want to pick up any of that. So I worked really hard on my own linguistics so that I could sound as white as possible. And I do carry a lot of shame from that, and from some of the other things that were imposed on me, which I can go into a little bit later. But May, would you be willing to share a little bit from your end?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a Hmong American refugee. I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand called Ban Vinai, and so I feel like I occupy an interesting place within, I guess, Hmong American history. I'm in my 40s, so I think that I've heard people talking about how when immigrants and refugees come to the United States, the first generation is just try to survive. They're trying to pay bills, make ends meet. The second generation is, they want to be American. They reject their cultural identity. And then the third generation tries to return and learn about their culture. So I'm in my 40s and I have experienced all of that in my generation, in my own body. And I've also witnessed all three generations happening at the same time. So it's an interesting space to occupy. I was born in a refugee camp in 1979, came to the United States when I was 9 months old, grew up mostly in Minnesota. And I was, we've talked about internalized, feeling internalized oppression, right? And I definitely experienced that. And it was because everywhere around I got I was told I saw messages and I was told messages that Asians were not welcomed, whether it was in, college prep classes at school or going to the grocery store or other things, right? Mm. And so I didn't assert myself like Naomi because, again, we're different generations. But I also grew up feeling a lot of shame because I think one of the things to keep in mind about Hmong people is that we came from an agrarian community, right? And so if you can imagine people who are an orally-based culture from an agrarian community suddenly plopped in the United States, it's crazy culture clash. I spent most of my life, I love pop culture, and that's a lens through which I view the world. And so I think this gives you some context for the world in which I grew up. In the 1980s, if I wanted to see Asian people, and I and my family did, this is how we saw Asian people on TV at the movies. There were so many movies about the war. I remembered vividly the movie Casualties of War, for example, where a bunch of white American soldiers end up raping this Vietnamese woman. And that was brutal, but we watched it a lot because in a lot of ways, that was one of the ways that we felt like we could see some of our experiences reflected. And now that I think about that, and like, how much did we want to be seen that we had to watch movies in which we saw people with our faces, our similar faces brutalized. In almost every single movie that I saw in the 80s and 90s, Asian men were emasculated. Asian women were, again, as Naomi said, super hypersexualized or just quiet and submissive, but they never ended up with any of the Asian men, right? They were always partnered with mostly white men. And I even think about like when I discovered X-Men, the comic book series as well as the TV shows. And I was really drawn to the character Psylocke. And Psylocke has it's a fascinating story in and of itself. She's an Asian woman, or at least that's what I thought. The real story is that she's actually a white woman inside an Asian woman's body. Anyway, I'm writing a whole essay series about Psylocke. But again, this just points to how invisible we were. And so one of the fascinating things about the pandemic was that I think for a long time when the United States talked about race in this country, Asians were never really part of the conversation. I think we were still seen as alien, not important enough. It was not okay to make fun of like other communities of color, but it was still okay to make fun of Asians. And one of the things that the pandemic made kind of clear was that violence against Asian bodies became much more visible. And as a result, people suddenly felt like they had to pay attention. And so I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been that, sadly, we have more of a platform. That, and not to make a joke out of it, but also BTS, right? Has also helped make us much more visible. So thank you, Koreans.
You're welcome. I as a Korean contributed to that. You're welcome. But I mean, we do need to probably address later in this episode the differentiation between what I like to call a domestic Asian and a foreign Asian, because that is an issue. That is an issue because
that is completely,
because people don't differentiate us, right? They don't differentiate. Like when people, for example, I know this is a little bit of a sidebar. I'm sorry, Nate and Scott, but like when Parasite won the Academy Award in 2020, just like a month before the pandemic, and because of BTS, I remember people telling me like, "This is great, Naomi. Congratulations. This is your time. You're finally gonna do well. You're gonna sell all your shit, all your movies and all your TV shows are gonna be made. Like this is like, wow, Korea's taking over." And I'm just like, yeah, it's South Korea. It's not Korean Americans. It's not people
from Minnesota
that are gonna do that. And that is something like, May and I, we talk about this a lot in our work with FOC, and also just our work as Asian American artists and writers, is that because we are from Minnesota and we're, from America's heartland, we're considered to be a flyover state, that even Asian Americans within our own community don't think we're actually Asian American, that we can't carry that banner, that we can't represent our people. And, of course, people say that the identity, the term Asian American is not a racial term, it's a political term. Yes, that's true. And that because we're made up of so many different ethnicities and religions and languages, that we're not really united, and that we really don't have that kind of commonality, let's say, of the Latino community, because they're so unified in the language of Spanish, or the Black community unified in America's racism and slavery and all that, and that we don't have that same kind of unifier. But the thing is that, like, for us, it's weird to hear, especially since I work so much in Los Angeles, and I'm currently in Los Angeles right now, actually in Scott's living room,
your office.
but that we're not considered to be a part of Asian America because we're not from LA or from New York. And that sometimes is really frustrating because there are over 300,000 Asian Americans in the state of Minnesota for a population of, I think, maybe 2 million people. That's quite extraordinary. And I think we have a lot of Asian Americans who are in political power right now in the state of Minnesota as well. So it is kind of weird to talk about like our placement, especially since we're talking to two coastal people right now.
East Coast and West Coast.
Yeah.
And trying to be like, hey, we matter and we also exist.
Well, and I think,
isn't that nice?
I was just thinking about, I mean, just going back to something that Naomi talked about, I feel like America has, never really liked Asians that much, but especially Asian Americans, because if you think about the types of Asians that get to occupy hyper visible spaces in the United States, they're like Naomi said, foreign Asians, right? Jackie Chan, Chow Yun Fat, Jet Li, Michelle Yeoh, and again, BTS, all these people, right? But in spite of the popularity and the fact that so many people internationally consume Asian culture, the United States is not really interested in Asian American stories still.
And you know what's sad is that Asia doesn't care about us either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think this is what's really kind of unique about our placement is, May and I always kind of joke about this, that like I have a country to go back to. May unfortunately does not.
We have no country.
Yes. My apologies. I would just like to point out I don't think we ever imperialized you guys.
You don't. I was gonna say, Naomi, you don't have to apologize. The Chinese have to apologize to us. The United States government first, and then the Chinese. Let me do some research to see if the Vietnamese need to do that. I don't know.
They probably, actually, the Vietnamese probably do, and so does the Lao Communist government. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of weird, and to occupy this place and to think about our identities, in this aspect, especially since everything that's kind of going on in the United States, and now that we're going through another huge China Red Scare at the moment, which has really impacted the way, again, all of us are impacted by it, because they don't know the difference. They don't know, Nate, that you're Japanese and Filipino, May is Hmong, and Scott is JA, and I'm Korean. To their eyes, we all look Chinese to them.
Yeah. Well, they're all the same.
Yeah.
And Scott, you're fourth generation, right?
I am. Yeah.
So your family has been here longer than a lot of other folks.
Yeah, but I'm still an immigrant, though.
Exactly.
To most of America.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I when I was in college, I went to college in South Carolina, and I remember very, very often being asked, "Where are you from? Where are you really from?"
Yeah, really from.
And I kept dialing it down. I'm like, "Oh, I'm from New York City area." They're like, no, but where are you from? Okay, you got me. I was born in a town called East Rutherford, New Jersey. I don't actually live in New York City. Sorry, I live about 30 minutes west of New York City. No, but where are you really, really from?
Well, when a man and a woman love each other, and they turn off the lights and get underneath the sheets.
Men have penises.
For the record, I just want to say that I got over my internalized oppression when I was 18. Okay, so
Nice.
It's been a lot.
Nice.
Nice.
I mean, I hate myself for other reasons. It's never because I'm Asian.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was interesting when you were bringing up earlier, Nate, that you were talking about the Christianity does really, I think, does play a part, because my family, surprise, surprise, as Korean Americans, guess what? We weren't Christian. I did not grow up religious at all. And I think I was able to, even though like Koreans like are psycho and love to like make things their own, and that's why the Korean,
she said it.
Yeah. I mean, I can say it, but Scott, if you say it, then that's oppression, since your people were imperialized my people, so that's not cool. But
that's punching down, huh?
And Nate's listeners are going to be like, "What the hell is going on?" This is a lot of inner Asian jokes, and it's okay.
But I would also say this too. Yeah, Naomi. One of the things I love about, even though Hmong people occupy we're really low on the social hierarchy for a lot of Asian communities. The great thing is that I can punch up at everyone.
Yeah,
except the Quran. Except the Quran.
No, you keep your mouth shut about the Quran.
I'm gonna shut up about the Quran.
Okay. We're all keeping our mouths shut about that. So and I think religion does actually, since this is typically a religious podcast talking about religion, I think it does play a huge part in like assimilation and
A bad
and
part.
how people perceive each other.
Yeah.
But
well,
I mean,
religion is partly why. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
I mean, yeah, because it's a form of assimilation. Religion is a form of American imperialism through missionary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why I'm here in the United States.
That's why I'm here in the
I
United
mean-
States too. I mean, no, it's
Well,
it's a
I mean,
different form
the-
of imperialism.
Sorry. The first part was the CIA. The CIA going over to Southeast Asia and fucking things up. That was the first part. But the second reason why I'm specifically in Minnesota is because the Lutherans sponsored us over here with the hope of probably. One of my friends is like, they only brought us here because they want to go to heaven. I'm like, I want to write a poem called "The Lutherans Only Brought Us to America so they could go to heaven."
Hey, you know what? What I appreciate about the Lutherans is that they were the most chill about it. I feel.
Yeah,
In terms of their
they're still not
missionary work?
overbearing.
Yeah.
Garrison Keeler.
And plus,
Garrison Keeler.
don't speak.
Wait,
him.
Garrison Keeler was a Lutheran?
And he's from Minnesota.
Oh,
Yeah.
we don't speak of Garrison Keeler
No, fuck that
Yeah,
guy.
anymore.
So
Yeah.
I pulled that one from
fuck
way
that guy.
back.
Yeah, we can all forget about Lake Wobegon.
Yeah.
So, that is interesting. Bringing up erasure, I like what you said, Naomi, about how Asian media focuses so much on the foreign Asian experience, and it was something that I never even recognized because I guess being the son of immigrants, I didn't see myself growing up as having like a community around me or any kind of real identity, and so the media that I would consume was always, whatever cool foreign thing that was out there that my white friends were getting into, and they're like, "Oh, Nate, you like kung fu movies?" Yeah. Forgetting the fact that I'm Japanese and kung fu is not a part of my culture, but
But it is, Nate. Yeah.
what did I miss?
You just didn't know.
I didn't know.
You know kung fu, man. Just try it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It got uploaded into my brain through the Matrix.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us might have some Chinese in us. I don't know. Is that
yeah,
really offensive? I'm pretty sure I've got some Chinese in me.
Oh, you definitely do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
don't.
surprised.
I checked. I wish I did.
I haven't done my 23andMe, but
Yeah, I see. I
given
did
the fact
23
that
and me, and I'm like boring. 100% Japanese.
really,
Wow. Yeah,
Huh.
Scott.
Look at that.
I was
pure
Korean. They gave me
blood.
Korean for a little bit. Yeah, no, for like 2 or 3 years. You can ask Naomi. I was like, "Hey, sister," because I was like 6% Korean, and I was like just scarfing kimchi and like I practiced like self-loathing and freaking out about things. I guess the more people submit, the more accurate it gets, and then they took it away. So I'm not
damn it.
Korean.
No more Korean.
Just Japanese. So
That sucks.
anyway,
But
sorry, that had nothing to do with anything.
what I find really interesting, because there's the topic of Asian erasure and Asian invisibility comes up relatively often in our circles, and but I think one thing that's also very important that you both have brought up is the erasure of the Asian American identity, and how, like you said, Naomi, that's not me. Okay, that's exciting, good for them, but
It's related.
yeah, and I can to a degree I can see myself there. But the thing is, when I go and visit my family in Japan, I will never be one of them. I'll never be Japanese. I'll never fit in that culture.
Yeah.
And so, as an Asian American, I don't see myself enough. Excuse me while I get some coughs out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt that this past fall. I returned to South Korea after, I think, over 20 years since I've last been to South Korea with my family. And I've always very acutely have known that I am not a Korean woman. I still have all my original parts, first off. and
Oh,
hey, it's just
you mean
people
unaltered
just
parts, right?
Yeah, people just love plastic surgery. It's fine. It's cool and it works and blah blah blah. But and Koreans do it. But then also it's just like I always knew that I was an outsider within the Korean American community itself. So I knew it was never going to, like, going to Korea was going to be 1,000 times worse, because if K-Town girls in LA are making fun of me, then I knew South Korea was going to be a totally brutal place. And but I mean, it is interesting to kind of go back and to kind of see what's it like and how it is. And I think especially after the past few years with the rise of anti-Asian hate, the amount of, hate crimes and discrimination that was going on, I think what was really refreshing about being in South Korea is that despite me being tall, fat, and ugly American that I am, to South Korean standards, I was in a homogeneous society where I was now the majority, and people like me were the majority, like Koreans were the majority, and that felt
in Korea.
Yeah, in Korea. Think about that. Certain parts I did not feel the majority, because it was where my grandmother lives is in Busan, and Busan is the town that borders the DMZ. So sometimes there were a lot of American soldiers, and I'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here!" Literally, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here.
Go back where you came from.
But it was kind of refreshing to feel that, to have that feeling, and the fear of, like, the target of being an Asian woman wasn't on my back. It was just the target of being a woman that was on my back. But I mean, because that's the reality of being a woman, is that unfortunately, 99% of the world, no matter where you go, it's still patriarchy, it's still misogyny, it's still violence against women. And that's one thing that, like, I always try to remind, especially since I think I made this joke a lot to Scott and May on separate or together occasions, where when Asian American women, rightfully so, talk about the misogyny and the patriarchy of Asian men and Asian American men, and that's why, they turn to other facets and other races and choose to have other partners. But I always try to remind everybody that, misogyny and patriarchy is the same. It just might look different. And what are you going to choose? In America, misogyny and racism. At least in Korea, I just had to deal with misogyny. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting in that regard to be back.
The Chapel Probation podcast takes a critical look at evangelical colleges and universities, focusing initially on Azusa Pacific University, where I taught English for 15 years. I'm Scott Okamoto, and I'm writing a book about how I deconstructed from faith completely while at APU. This podcast, though, is my tribute to the students and other faculty who survived evangelical higher education. They faced ridiculous racism, sexism, anti-LGBTQ hatred, and all manner of bigotry. From the heartless evils of the prosperity gospel to the destructive pseudo-theology of purity culture, the stories will break your heart, but they will also inspire. These people faced bigotry and fought back. In a weird, kind of sick way, we went through some shit, but we formed identities and we formed communities through it all. I hope you will join us.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica from the Leaving the Village podcast. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning into this show. We're so grateful that you've decided to spend your time with us. Seriously, Dan, Gail, Kathleen, Nate, Scott, and the rest of us here at the Dauntless Media Collective couldn't produce content like the show you're listening to without your support. I'd also like to invite you even further into the conversation. Right now, there are some great discussions happening over in the Dauntless Media Collective Discord server. If you're interested in chatting with other folks who are deconstructing and decolonizing the oppressive traditions they came from, please feel free to hop onto the server. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a place where communities can gather online for chatting on a wide variety of topics. In our Discord server, we have channels devoted to general deconstruction conversations, some meme sharing, therapeutic venting about whatever religious bullshit you're currently dealing with, and even a channel specifically devoted to talking about the latest episode of the podcast you're listening to right now. I hope you'll join us. You can log in directly to the Dauntless server by clicking on the link in the show notes or heading to dauntless.fm and clicking on the link in the top banner. See you there.
I had a similar experience because we went to Japan back in 2017. It was my first time. And I wondered if it was going to feel like some kind of homecoming, the motherland, the fourth generation American prodigal son coming back to Japan. And really, I was just a foreigner there. I was just another. They thought I was Taiwanese because I didn't speak Japanese. But I realized I'm not Japanese. That is not a place I would go. Like if I had to leave America for whatever reason, I would not go there because I will not be accepted as a Japanese person. I don't speak the language. I don't understand the culture much other than intellectually. And it was like a weird feeling that, because I loved being there and I loved learning the history and I loved seeing the culture, and we went all over Japan. It's a beautiful place. I love the food. Really nice people. But they're
Scott,
not me.
You're totally not Japanese.
Right? I said I'm totally not Japanese. Like I'm just not. And I suppose I could, but if, like I said, if I had to leave and go somewhere, I'd go to like Mexico because at least I speak Spanish, and I like the food. I guess I could go to an English-speaking country too, but Canada. Gail, I go to Canada. But yeah, so to have this idea that we are without a homeland because we're not fully accepted here, as as May pointed out, I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, but it doesn't matter. No one assumes that I've been here for 4 generations. They just assume I'm an immigrant, which is fine. It's nothing wrong with being an immigrant, but it's a weird thing to not have agency in how I am perceived and how I move through this world simply because I'm Asian American. And for all the reasons that May and Naomi have been talking about, erasure, a sort of dislike of Asian Americans. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. And I think even that that blending of religion that we were all pointing out. Scott, you've got a book coming out, and the title is Asian American Apostate.
Yeah.
Losing Religion and Finding Myself at an Evangelical University. That sounds harrowing.
Yeah. It's not as scary as Brad Wanishi's book.
Yeah.
It has some funny moments. But yeah, really, Naomi is brought up she wasn't Christian. I'm beginning to think Naomi isn't even Korean anymore because she wasn't Christian. She says things like bag instead of bag because she's from the Midwest.
I speak.
Doesn't have plastic surgery. Yeah,
hey,
so
I'm what Korean people can look to in 15 years and be like, that's OG, like that's our base model,
an oracle. Yeah,
yeah.
You're like a
know what?
demigod.
Those K-Town girls may make fun of you, but in Minnesota, you are a role model for many Asian American girls.
I know. Surprisingly, I am quite the role model for
because you're badass.
Naomi is, but you are too, May, because you are an amazing playwright and writer and activist. Yeah. So,
thank you. Yeah. I already know I'm a role model because people tell me.
I saw you in United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell. You read on the air a poem about anal sex. So
yeah, I did.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's a poem called what was it called anyway?
Papaya salad.
Lao papaya salad is like anal sex.
Yeah,
it was just something we kind of did on the fly, and then they ended up like putting it on CNN's website. So
yeah, it wasn't on the. W. Kamau Bell's face while you read it, that was priceless. It was like, well, because and to the whole conversation, you surprised America by reading that poem because it wasn't what It wasn't what people would expect from an Asian American woman.
Yeah, and I think they were probably thinking that, you know, I would write a story about, oh, I'm caught between two cultures. And, you know, I wrote that. I wrote stuff like that, but that was like 20 years ago.
We all have.
So,
yeah. It's part of our development.
Yeah. I think, and I've said this before in interviews and other places, but I think one of the sad but beautiful things about being an Asian American creative, especially someone who, you know, works in comedy, is that people have such low expectations of us. So everything we say is, you know, like if we subvert their expectations, it's already exciting and interesting, right? Because their expectations are that one, we don't speak English. One, we're not funny. One, I mean, sorry, that's two. My bad. I'm not. See, there you go. I'm an Asian who doesn't know.
Not
math.
your model minority, right?
Yes, exactly. You know, and also we're feminists, but we talk about sex. We like sex. But we don't like bad sex. You know. So the thing is, I think again, we subvert expectations, not because, you know, we're trying to be edgy, but just because we're trying to bring our whole humanity to the table in conversations like this, or, you know, in our shows or other places.
That's a good segue to talking about your work, both of you in the Funny Asian Women's Collective. Could you tell us more about that?
I'll give you the spiel, then Naomi can give you like the our origin story maybe. So FAC, Funny Asian Women Collective, our mission is we use comedy to combat the dehumanization and invisibility of Asian American women. That's officially what we tell our funders, but it's actually what we do as well. So Naomi, you can tell them our origin story.
Yeah, so about like 10 years ago. Was it 10 years? No, it wasn't 10 years ago.
2014?
Yeah, 2014. Ah, fuck. That is
9.
Almost.
Oh my God.
I already revealed my age, but you're not going to reveal.
I'm 19.
You were 9.
I'm 19. I was born in 2003. Real cool stuff. I've lived quite a life already. Yeah, so I was invited to do this reading, and the organizer, who is surprisingly an Asian American woman themselves, was just like, hey, Naomi, want you to do this thing. And I was like, yeah, no problem. Glad to help out. She goes, you can't swear or talk about sex. And I was like, oh, fuck. What the hell am I going to talk about then?
I have 20 seconds of material.
And I don't, and the thing is that like, this is my bread and butter is swearing. And also talking about sex. It's kind of the basis in my brand of comedy, and being.
That's all you talk about.
I talk about other things
Besides
too.
alcohol. Sorry, you talk about alcohol.
That's
and
right.
Your dad.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds Christian.
And I also talk about Shohei Ohtani now. He has been part of my.
Yeah, don't get her
shtick.
started on Shohei Ohtani.
We have a whole podcast dedicated to Shohei Ohtani.
Naomi, I'm putting Shohei under the sex category for you.
Yeah, that's true. There's some overlap there.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. To my defense, I can talk about Shohei Ohtani in terms of baseball. Scott and I, we are the co-hosts with our friend Kim Cooper of Asians in Baseball, another podcast that Nate actually was a guest
Nate
on
was on.
while I was in South Korea.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So origin story.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
back to
You did the
origin
reading.
story.
You did the reading. You were
Did a
told
reading.
no sex, no swearing.
And I bombed. So May and her husband her husband Peter was in the audience, and Mooks, our other co-founder, and her partner was in the audience. And then very much like May was very straightforward. You told me I sucked.
You suck.
Actually, my husband said it to you. I didn't have the guts to say it. I was thinking in my head though. Literally after the reading, we walked a block over to my office and we were drinking, and then my husband was just like, Naomi, why did you suck tonight? You're usually so funny. And we could visibly see on stage that, she was trying to talk. Every time she tried to say something, she visibly stopped herself. And that night we just said, fuck this shit, because this happens to Asian women all the time. We're always told to be quiet, to not say things that would offend our communities or our families. And so we were like, let's just create a space where Asian women could talk about their stories on their own terms, whatever that means. And we created FAWK. We knew that night it was going to be FAWK. So we called ourselves Funny Asian Woman ... K, because we didn't know what the K stood for.
Clan.
And then we applied for a grant under that name. We got the grant, and then a year later, we were like, let's say Kollective as a nod to the Koreans.
There you go.
But I think what's interesting is that I don't think people recognize how much like we have to navigate these systems. I mean, these like expectations. When I went to grad school pretty late, and I still remember, talking to my cohort, and I talked about how like people wanted to weigh in on a lot of my work. For example, when I had a play called Confessions of a Lazy Hmong Woman, and one of the pushbacks I got was actually from Hmong women as well as some other folks, was that, I always tell this story. I was doing the show in Wisconsin at a college campus, and Wisconsin. And this young white man came up to me during my artist meet and greet, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, when he saw flyers of my show, he was so sad because Hmong people were some of the hardest working people he knew. And I was like, it's a freaking comedy. Plus, it's my story. I'm the lazy Hmong woman. And, again, I heard, that there were some Hmong women who were really offended by my portrayal of Hmong, this was the title of my show, that I was making our people look bad. And these are feminists, right? And I was just like, really? Because this is my story. And so I think this speaks to the fact that we had so few stories out there that if there are a couple representations, everyone expects you to be perfect.
Yeah.
Even when I wrote my play, The Korean Drama Addict's Guide to Losing Your Virginity, right?
Awesome play.
Thank you. I heard there was some pushback about the title because the pushback was, what are her elders going to think? And I'm like, my elders are not coming to see this fucking play. They're not.
Right.
So, but I bring this up because when I was talking to my cohort members, very few of them talked about they were just creating art because they wanted to create art. If there were restrictions, it was about themselves, possibly with a couple of family members. And they were just surprised that I was getting like a lot of, pushback from people in the community, from producers, from, just so many people regulating what they thought I needed to be writing. Right. So these are some of the confines. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had that coming from my own community in terms of Korean Americans. I think they never stopped me before doing it. They just I think at the end will just be like, oh, that's not Naomi. What Naomi is doing is not Korean. It's not representative of our community. Which I've had multiple Korean Americans tell me that. At the highest level, like at, the decision-making level in film and television, they're just like,
oh, wow.
And yeah, they would be like, yeah, if I'm going to, do a Korean American project, I'm not going to do one from Minnesota. I'm going to do one from either, New York or from LA. And I was just like, well, you're kind of alienating millions of Koreans who don't live in LA or in New York, or becoming the biggest community of Korean Americans, which is Atlanta. And so, but I think what was always interesting is that, and Scott can tell his perspective of this, is how other people who are white or of different races would have would think about my work and be surprised or even assume that I had no idea of like what I was actually doing. Do you remember that, Scott? I think you told me this once, that someone told you.
Yeah, someone in a high place where you happen to be working described you as a baby writer who still needed to learn, and you had already accomplished quite a bit at that point. And then they said, and she's really funny, and she doesn't even know it. And I was like, what do you mean she doesn't know it? She's working it. That shit's funny because she's trying to be funny. Like, but they're like, they wanted to feel like they discovered this diamond in the rough, right? This
wow.
So they could take credit for it because, they see humor and intelligence in an Asian American woman that, maybe they assume no one else sees because they don't. And so, yeah, it was disgusting. It made me so mad to hear this person say this.
Yeah. And I mean, it's weird because it's just like, she doesn't even know she's funny. Well, the thing is that like, I'm trying to sell you this show. This pitch is going to be funny because I'm trying to prove to you in real time, face to face, that I'm a funny person and that you could trust me to deliver this comedy.
Also, you and I charge people to pay. People pay us to be funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all sold out your next show, right? I just saw it. The big Ordway show.
Yeah. I mean, we charged a lot of people to come see us at the Ordway. Over 800 people came, and then we have a show in the end of February that's already sold out, and it's just like, and we're not even trying that hard for this show. We're calling it the intentional hot mess show because none of us are going to well, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to prep. I don't need to.
I don't know what I mean. I just think I'll probably talk about how I'm having a midlife crisis, but I'll figure that out couple hours before the show.
hopefully this episode doesn't air until after the show.
It's okay.
We don't care. We actually
the
don't
tickets
give
are sold,
a shit.
so yeah.
Scott, that is our charm. We show up as is, and people love the humanity. Okay.
Yeah. Well, to your credit, you've built up an audience. People in Minnesota will and not just Asian Americans. I know I have friends of all nationalities who've seen you all perform. And that's not a small thing. So do you think, so it seems to me like the expectations of us, whatever they are, model minority, submissive, whatever, worker bees, when people encounter us and we're not those things, there's like a violent response to it, right? It's like people get pissed that we're not behaving the way they assume we're supposed to behave. And it feels like that's directly tied to the recent Asian hate, but you can trace it all the way back to, Vincent Chin and the 60s and 70s. It's like, this is something that keeps happening, and it's getting better, this year with Everything Everywhere All at Once doing well. And there is an Asian American person in that cast.
There are two,
There are two, right. Yeah, Kay is also Asian American. So, so do you guys have thoughts on that? Like when you come across someone and you don't meet their expectations, there's this kind of visceral response from people. Or no, people are too nice in Minnesota.
No, they're not nice at all. I just gave you a list of the people who've oppressed me, Scott, just because of my work.
Well, your own people too, right? But
it's my own people and outsiders.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Minnesota is not immune to this. Like in March of 2020, right when COVID happened, a very, very violent incident happened on the light rail station in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, where a woman was essentially like, she was kicked so hard. It was disgusting. It was so bad. She, on the light rail, and it was a young Asian woman. It was a young Asian American woman who this individual just assaulted her terribly. And then also last year, after, it's really like, when we talk about the 2-year anniversary of the Atlanta shootings, that we can't forget that last year so many Asian American women were killed in New York and also in Minnesota. Yulia Lee, an Asian immigrant woman in Minnesota, was also shot in her car in St. Paul in February of 2022. And and I think like there is this perception that, oh, Minnesotans are so nice. Minnesota nice actually isn't nice. We're actually quite a cruel group of people. Watch the movie Fargo. You'll understand. No one lives through that movie. People aren't alive. But they're
polite, so.
Yeah, we're polite, but we'll still,
they'll still stab you. Yeah.
Yeah, still stab you or throw you in a wood chipper. So there is this kind of violence, visceral reaction. There have been times in my life, specifically college, and in high school, but mostly in college, because I I think just my personality and the way that who I am and this bullshit I'm sick of, and also the way that May describes me as a known bully. Which I was. I guess I was a known
Who
bully.
everybody's actually admires.
Yeah. I was a known bully. I had to
You
stick
were a
up for
leader.
myself. Yeah,
You were a leader.
That's why I won the Bush Leadership Fellowship. God, just
We're
kidding.
still gonna get back to that, but
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. But
Bush's beans.
Bush's beans. But in college, like I remember I was at a party and a couple of these really drunk assholes were like messing with my friend, and I was just like sick of it. So I stood up from the couch, and of course I had my beer in a red Solo cup because I'm still a basic bitch.
It's
And
college.
and I splashed my beer on this guy because he needed to be snapped out of it. And I remember he had that look in his eye where he was so surprised that it happened. And then he had a look in his eye, like he had that look in his eyes where he was like, I'm going to kill this person. And it wasn't until my other friend who was just like, okay, we got to go. We got to go. And it, like, this moment is still very clear in my eyes, like in my head, in terms of how his eyes first were so shocked, and then it was just like, oh, like I'm gonna physically harm this person. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, that is something that's you know, people don't I don't think he expected me to fight back, but I was ready to fight because, you know, you're not going to take me down alone. I'm not.
I'm curious about so comedy. It's so fascinating, the intersection of the Asian identity, the Asian American identity, and comedy, because I've found, at least in my life, and then a lot of the comedians of Asian descent that I've seen, there almost seems to be this reflex of get ahead of the joke, right? So like, it's we're gonna make fun of ourselves before you can, which I used to love that kind of comedy, and now
Yeah, me too.
just feel sad, and it reminds me of the things that I used to do. Like I remember one of the jokes I used to say often were things like, oh, you know, we see life in 16:9 widescreen, so you know, just to get ahead of the jokes, right? To stave off the jokes that I knew were about to come about my phenotype and my appearance. How have you found working in comedy? How have you found a way to sort of, I mean, you're subverting expectations, like you've said. Are there pitfalls? Are there strategies? Are there things that you need to watch for, or just ways that you enter a space that's do you even have that in mind as you walk into a space, knowing your racial identity and what you're doing?
I think we always defend and advocate that FOC is a space where we don't censor ourselves and that our performers don't do that. We actually had an incident where some folks, okay, let's say Asian women, actually were trying to censor us. And, you know, that was a hard conversation to have, because I think there are some people who are not very funny because they compromise the humor because they are worried about what other people will say. And I think one of the power of comedy is that you say the things that other people cannot say, right? Sometimes we laugh because someone is actually saying something we were thinking, but we didn't have the nerve to say. And I think that comedy is also important because it allows you to say some of these hard things in a way that is more palatable for people, right? We can talk about racism, oppression, but people can swallow that because it's funny. And again, there's truth in this, right? I don't know anybody in FOC who just makes up a joke just for a punchline. You know, people are telling their truth, and so there's skin in the game, if you will, right? I don't know. Thoughts, Naomi?
I mean, it's just, you know, it's just sad because when I see Asian American comedians or people comedic actors or people who work in the comedy space who try to get ahead of the joke. I'm just like, wow. I mean, it sucks. I feel kind of bad for them because they don't really have a lot of self-esteem, and that they feel really insecure about it. And I think, I think for me, and at our past show at the Ordway, our show was very Asian in the sense that we didn't explain half of the jokes, and we were dropping a lot of jokes that were very, I guess, in-house for an Asian American community. And I had a lot of friends who are not Asian, who are white and black and Latino, who were at the show, and they were just like, I didn't understand half of the jokes that you guys made, but I knew it was funny because other people were laughing, but then we could just tell by the tone and the way that we delivered it. And I think that's really important is that sometimes we, have faith in the audience, have faith in the people who are watching it, that they might be able to understand it and might appreciate it, even though they might not know what you're talking about, or have these already preconceived notions of you. But I mean, yeah, that censorship thing that happened a couple of years ago, that drove me fucking insane. I was so angry. About it because this is exactly what FOC was trying not to do. If we are not going to allow us the space to actually be our full selves, no one is ever going to give that space. If we don't even give it to ourselves, how the hell are we supposed to expect other people to give us that space?
Yeah, and I think it's about you take care of yourself. Like I always tell folks, okay, Naomi, Mooks, and I, we have potty mouths. Yeah, we swear all the time, but you don't have to do that to be on a FOC lineup. You can be funny without talking about, sex or using swear words or other stuff. That being said, like they just needed to take care of themselves. And I feel like, again, it kind of goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier, which is that I talked about earlier, which is that we have sometimes in the Asian American community, and I think in a lot of BIPOC communities, we feel like we need to regulate each other so that we don't look bad to to white people, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it was a matter of I'm going to say the things I need to say. I'll be responsible for that. You say the things you need to say, and you be responsible for that. But don't try to censor us.
Wow.
I will also, can I just add something? We've been talking about the Atlantic shootings, and I still remember that when that happened, first of all, it was an exhausting month because the Atlanta shootings happened, and within the Hmong community, like I think there was basically an average of one Hmong woman dead every single week, killed by her husband's hand or something, I even wrote a whole op-ed about this. Anyway, it was exhausting, and what I remember was that people reached out to FOC to ask if we could perform to lighten the load, to help people heal. And we actually just said no. We're checking out. We're not doing this emotional labor. We're not doing, and the first thing we programmed after that was a poetry reading. And I organized it. I was just like, it's not supposed to be funny. If it is funny, it can be. But I just invited Asian women poets from across the country to respond to something. And we were just like, we're always caretakers. And this is not a place for us to be taking care of people.
Yeah. So I do want to give us a little bit of space to sit in some of that. Our plan is to publish this episode on the day of the anniversary of the shooting. So it's going to be a lot. And if you're listening to this on that day, I hope you take time. If you are Asian American, even if you're not, and you don't know what to say or what to feel, or what to think, how to interact with your Asian American friends, just sit with them and sit with all of this. I mean, we ran the gamut in our conversation today, and we still haven't figured out whether you have anything to do with George W. Bush, Naomi. Do you, by the way, is that, so can we explain that real quick? The Bush Leadership Fellow, who's Bush?
Yes. So May and I are both, May won the Bush Leadership Fellowship in what year?
2011, I think, the first year.
And so the Bush Leadership Fellowship is from the Bush Foundation that's based out of Minnesota. And it has nothing to do with George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, no Bush in political power. It's actually founded by Archibald Bush, who made all of his money from 3M, which is based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. Fun fact for those who don't know. So this is Post-it money, not international war crime money. But I do want to make it clear that I would still take George W. Bush's money.
Hey, money is money.
Yeah.
Might as well be you. Just putting that out there.
Yeah. We would like some money, Bush family.
Yes.
All of us.
Please, we're no longer eligible for any more money. So please give us some special,
Yeah, I'll take that blood money. All money is blood money, right? This is America, guys. Everything is tainted.
But I mean, I think that's why we kind of occupy this interesting space too. Is just we do the comedy, we work on our own personal stuff. We're very sacrilegious in a lot of ways, but we also do leadership work, and so I think that's just it's not about complications. Again, it's about just thinking about all the different identities that we inhabit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even though it does seem like we are overachievers in the sense that we do a lot of work, we're not.
I think I'm a slacker, actually. But
actually, no, I'm actually an overachiever. Not because I'm an overachiever, but because I demand excellence from everybody, including myself. It's just a personal thing. It has nothing to do with my racial identity.
You sure though? Are you sure?
Naomi watches a ton of TV, so she goes all out with that. So.
I wish I had been an overachiever, but I was told I would amount to nothing, and so I believed it.
See, look at these untruths, these preconceptions harming Asian Americans.
But you know what? My half-ass efforts were actually really good. Apparently, I scared a lot of white kids with my grades. I wasn't even trying. I wish I'd known. I was smart. I would have tried.
Yeah.
I'm actually not kidding.
I know you're not kidding.
I know.
I've seen your yearbook before.
Yeah.
But I'll say this about Falk, because back to what I was saying about expectations, the fact that you have created this brand in Minnesota Nice Land, where you're I think wasn't like one of your early slogans like clapping back at
microaggressions
or microaggressions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I write in my book about a time I was in a writing program, and one of my classmates said they didn't hear the Asian in my writing and they really wanted to hear it. And I was like,
my gosh.
I didn't have the sense of self to respond because I had no idea what they were talking about. But the class kind of sussed out that this person wanted me to sound like Amy Tan and be, soft and poetic and Zen-like. And I was writing kind of this, balls to the wall story. So that's the expectation of some people about Asians. And so the fact that you guys are doing what you do, being purposefully not just raunchy, but aggressive and angry and pushing back on the assumptions and the lazy assumptions about all of our communities, I think it's a really great thing. I wish you guys could travel and perform in places like, that aren't in the middle of the country, because
bring us out if you actually want some good Asian American comedy, or my bad, if you want some good comedy, let us know.
Oh, we're gonna do this again. So, all right. So let's talk about why you're not really Asian in Minnesota. No, I'm kidding.
That's a whole other conversation for another day.
Well, that was great. Like when Nate was on the Asians in Baseball, we had this sort of we had it out: East Coast, West Coast, Dodgers, Yankees.
That was good stuff.
we said nice things. We said some harsh things about each other's teams.
Yeah. Look, it doesn't help that I'm a Yankee fan, but when you're born and raised in this part of the country, you can't help it.
I know. It's big of us that we're friends.
May doesn't give two shits about sports, and we all know I'm a Twins fan, so
Yeah, that's why I was quiet. I don't know, and I don't care.
But we won't make fun of the Twins because that's punching down.
I'm gonna smack you.
That is true, Scott. That is true.
So we'll say nothing.
I think the Twins are okay. It's the Vikings that are very heartbreaking, aren't they?
Oh, hey, see, you know that. So.
May,
I know that
every
much.
Minnesota sports team is heartbreaking, okay? It hurts.
Well, the Twins have a nice history, and so do the Vikings.
That's all they have.
Shut up.
Sorry.
What was that quarterback?
Naomi said, I can say it about my people, but you can't say it, Scott.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
No more
I
talk of Minnesota
can say
sports.
about my
Okay.
people. You guys shut your mouths.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you? Do you guys have the social media, internet presence, and all that?
You can find Naomi at my house.
Well, we're Funny Asian Women Collective. You can find us at www.fawcollective, FAWKOLLECTIVE, or you can find us at Faw Collective on Instagram and on Twitter, and I guess on Facebook.
And if you want to know about me or Naomi individually, you can just Google us. So
Yes, I just want to point out that May is very distinctly her and herself. However, there are multiple Naomi Coes, and no, I am not. Yeah, I'm not Naomi
golfer.
Coe, the Canadian golfer in the LPGA. Unfortunately,
I didn't know that.
yeah. There's a
Sometimes we
Naomi
wish you
Coe.
were.
This whole show, I thought.
Yes,
Oh,
unfortunately,
you're not the golfer?
I'm not the golfer, nor am I like the famous breast cancer oncologist. I am just the loser. So I'm neither a golfer or a doctor, but those other Naomi Coes are doing quite well for themselves. So
All right. Well, we'll put
congrats, guys.
we'll put links in the show notes for people so they can click. And if you're driving, don't do that. Don't click anything. Just wait till you get to a safe spot and then click around in the show notes.
Eyes on the road.
Thank you again for joining us, you guys. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So this has been another episode of the Full Mutuality Podcast. As it turns out, I was actually dealing with COVID during that recording session, so on top of my shitty internet connection that night, which made our conversation really difficult to get through, I was fighting off more than just a cold, even though I was testing negative at the time. I do want to say thank you for listening to this episode. We have another one dropping today where Gail and I talk with Angie K. Hong about the relationship between racism, Orientalism, and evangelical purity culture and how that creates the deadly mix that targets Asian American women. If you haven't heard that one yet, please go check that out as well. The lives of Asian Americans are convoluted. As Scott mentioned, his family has been in the U.S. for 4 generations, but he's still looked at as an immigrant. Now, like he said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being an immigrant, but the fact remains that Asian Americans, no matter how long we've been in this country, never have agency over how we're perceived. Our entire lives we're looked at as foreigners. And when a virus that's believed to have originated in China makes its way to these shores, we are the ones who get blamed for it. We're the ones whose restaurants get vandalized, who are told to go back to where we came from as if we weren't born and raised in your neighborhoods, who are stabbed on the subway, pushed in front of trains, and followed home by complete strangers to be murdered in our own apartments. The Asian American experience is often referred to as that of perpetual foreigner. Many of us never learned our languages of origin, so it's not like we would thrive in the countries our parents and grandparents came from. When I visit Japan, I'm considered gaijin, outsider. But when people who look like me are being attacked and killed in Chinatown, K-Town, and Little Tokyo here in the US, what homes do we have left to go to?